All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here, and welcome back to Meta Monday, the weekly series where we analyze the Pokemon Pocket metagame and keep you guys up to date on everything going on in the competitive world of Pokemon Pocket. This past weekend was PMPT number 42, PMPT being, of course, the largest and longest running Pokemon Pocket tournament series. And it was actually the third tournament of this current season that we're in, Ruler of the Skies B4. We're going to break down all of the top placing deck lists and players from this past weekend's tournament, and then we're going to break down the metagame data and, again, give you guys everything you need to know about what's happening currently in Pokemon Pocket, because this season has been very, very interesting. But let's just get right into it. My intros have been getting too long lately, so we're just going to go ahead and dive into it. However, that being said, you got to go register for PMPT number 43, which is going to be the last tournament of this season, this B4 season, which is crazy because the next set is actually releasing like literally next week. I think it's coming out in 10 days from today, which is pretty crazy. But what that does mean is that in just, I think, 2 or 3 days, we're going to be getting the set release, or I guess the trailer for the next set coming to Pokemon Pocket, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. It's been already like almost 3 weeks now, but that's how quickly things happen in Pokemon Pocket, and I'm excited for it nonetheless. Also, keep in mind the World Championships are coming up. There's going to be a special Pokemon Pocket panel and likely some announcements about the game, which is also very, very exciting. Anyway, let's hop on over to PocketMads.com. Link to register down in the description below. Let's head on over to PocketMads.com, the best place to go for Pokemon Pocket related things, and we'll get into the tournament data and the results, guys. Let's do it. Shout out, by the way, to all of the players that competed here. I know ranked is out, right? So this is the first tournament this season since the ranked season released. So we had 325 players, which is very impressive considering that, ranked was coinciding with the tournament. So I do appreciate that. 105 different decks, different archetypes saw play at the tournament. We'll break down the metagame data after, but before we do that, we're going to get into the deck list because I know this is what you guys like to see. So here you go. These are the final standings from the tournament this past weekend. It was Led from France, who got first place, and he was playing Mega Lucario. So as you guys know, Mega Lucario, it's been probably the #1 deck of the majority of this season. I wouldn't say it came out of the gate firing, but after the metagame really settled in for this season, Mega Lucario has it really kind of put itself in a position to be, I would consider, the #1 deck. Not only the most popular, but just sort of the best deck currently. And it did get first place. That shouldn't be a big surprise to anyone. However, in second place, it was Fiddy Paldis, and he is from Chile, and that's second place, and that's going to be Magnezone and Heliolisk, which is also an interesting thing. So, there's been a couple of pretty large tournaments this season where the grand finals have been Magnezone to some degree and Lucario, but we're going to break down this Magnezone deck because it's a little bit different than, your typical Magnezone deck, playing both single prize archetypes being, Magnezone as we know it, but also the new Heliolisk package, right? So a purely single prize archetype did not get the win over Led in grand finals. So second place for Fiddy Paldis with Magnezone Heliolisk. Third place is, yes, Great Tusk Koraidon. This is a deck that's really stormed into the metagame over the last few days. I'm really excited about this. As you guys might know here on the channel, Great Tusk is one of my favorite, kind of archetypes in the game. I really think this is like a super potentially strong meta deck in the current, metagame. However, it's also a fighting type deck, and as we know, Mega Lucario is by far the most played deck this season. So, it's not something that I think will ever be considered as high tier as Lucario, but a third place finish, a Final Four finish for Great Tusk, maybe the first time in PMPT history, which is definitely interesting. Froggy X Leo from, I believe, Belgium, yep, in fourth place. Going to round out top 4 with Vespiquen. So Vespiquen has definitely still stuck around. I think it's a top 3 most played deck this season. Really taken over Sceptile at this point. It's just considered to be, again, one of the better decks in the game. It's grass typing, which is a big deal. Hyper consistent, tons of damage. A really, really strong deck. Takes advantage of all of the things that grass type decks have available to it right now, which coincidentally is a bit more than most other archetypes. Fifth place is going to be Hosey from Japan, and this is a player that, you know, is just consummately in the tops of the standings here. One of the best competitive players in Pokemon Pocket. A lot of these players are, but I just want to give a shout out to Hosey or Hosey. Again, I'm probably saying the name wrong. I apologize. But again, from Japan, continuously at the tops of these tournaments, and it's really cool to see, especially the time zone difference. So massive shout out to him. He was also playing Mega Lucario. So one thing I just wanted to mention right here, all 4 decks in top 4 are different archetypes. However, 7 of the 8 decks in top 8 are also different archetypes, and also 13 of the top 16 decks of this past weekend are all different archetypes. So that to me goes to show that there are a lot, and I mean a lot of different decks that you can play and be successful with in a competitive setting for Pokemon Pocket, which is really, really cool. And something that we've been saying for quite some time, but it kind of continues to be the case. Anyway, it's going to be Kylord from Mexico in 6th place playing Zygarde. This might be the best Zygarde placement at PMPT so far this season. I'm not positive about that, so I apologize if I'm missing or forgetting another placement. But yeah, Zoroark, definitely a strong deck. We'll take a look at the list. A lot of lists have been playing Hoopa anyway, and you'll notice that Hoopa wasn't really anywhere in top 4 for kind of the first time so far this season. Shout out to him, by the way. Quindorian from the United States, 7th place, and it's Sharpedo. So Sharpedo, again, finding its way, sneaking back into the metagame. Less lightning going on as there's more fighting type deck lists. Mega Sharpedo, certainly one of the better Pokemon and stronger Pokemon in the entire game. Water decks are always going to be playing Qianpao unless maybe a better option comes by. As we all know, Qianpao EX is very, very good, and Sharpedo is very good. And again, I do consider this to be, you know, a really high-tier meta deck, something that probably deserves to see a bit more play. Wasn't, you know, necessarily, I guess, that well-positioned early on the season where Lightning was a bit more popular, especially when Manectric was kind of flying around. But at this point, you know, going into this sort of last, you know, week or so, I think Sharpedo is actually, you know, a really solid choice. So a 7th place finish for Quindorian. I really love it. Shout out to him. And then in 8th place is Nobody. From nowhere, I suppose, as well. 8th place finish for him playing Dark Hoopa. So Hoopa is fighting its way here into top 8, but keep in mind, it's not the highest placing Dark type deck technically. I still think Hoopa EX is one of the more broken things in the entire game. But lots of other things in the game, you know, can beat it, like, pretty easily, right? So it's not completely, like, you know, running away with the meta. It's not even the most played deck this season, but I do think Hoopa EX is super strong, and Dark-type decks, similar to Grass, just have a lot going for them. But anyway, shout out to Nobody. And if we get outside of top 8, we have even more diversity. I'm going to quickly just brush over these players, but shout out to them. We have Garoth, also here from France, who was playing Vespiquen. So Vespiquen, 2 different decks here in top 16. We had Moserk in 10th place from India, who was playing Sleep Altaria. So Altaria fighting its way here high up, at least somewhat relevantly in the standings. And then next up, we have Big Slowpoke Fan, who's been, I believe, the #1 kind of player for this new Chandelure Oricorio archetype. And this is actually the Psychic type, the new Oricorio. We'll take a look at this deck list. In 11th place, shout out to him. Mames, 123 from the United States, was actually playing Beautifly and Dustox. So another pretty strong grass archetype. In fact, multiple different grass type decks, 3 different grass archetypes finding its way into top 16 this weekend. None of them are Mega Sceptile, which I find to be crazy, but massive shout out to him. I think the highest placement by far at a PMPT tournament for Beautiful Dustox, another new archetype. Brago TCG, shout out to him from the USA. 13th place, Dark Hoopa. So multiple Dark Hoopas here in top 16. And then Seedax from the US of A playing Venusaur, Mega Venusaur, finding its way into top 16. So again, 3 different grass type archetypes is very interesting. We had Vespiquen, we had Venusaur, 2 Vespiquen, really. 1 Venusaur and 1 Beautiful Dustox. So definitely interesting results, I would say, this weekend. Magma Akage from USA was, of course, also playing Dark Hoopa, but playing the variant with Sableye in 15th place. Shout out to him. And then we have Gagner? I don't know how to say the name. I apologize. From Germany, 16th place. And this is actually going to be our highest placing Dragonair / Mega Rayquaza deck. And he was, in fact, playing Dragonair and Dragon Arcana Altaria. So very interesting kind of top 16 representations here. But again, 13 different decks finding its way into top 16 is definitely crazy. So many strong decks, guys. I mean, you could really play whatever and have a chance to win these tournaments. But let's break down the deck lists individually. Let's talk about them. I know you guys kind of like to do that. We wait a long time. These videos really are a bit longer than they should be, but, you know, I don't edit them. I don't kind of cut things down. I like to give, you know, every different aspect of these videos their own time. And even though, you know, I don't know. Even if I reiterate myself, I apologize, but I like to talk, you know what I mean? And you guys can use the timestamps and skip ahead in the video anyway. Let's get into the deck list. The number one placing deck here, lead from France, Mega Lucario. Let's take a look at his deck list here and see if anything surprises us. So this is going to be one Bonsly in this list, still playing one Fighting Coach Lucario, which I like, and then we're playing one Hitmontop, and those are actually the only additional cards in the deck list as like leadoff options, which is interesting, right? We've seen a lot. We've seen Sock, you know, we've seen a Hitmonlee, even Hitmonchan EX. There's lots of different variations for Mega Lucario. For one, I think that a lot of the strongest decks in the game can get one-hit KO'd by Mega Lucario, like in terms of like the best decks, right? When you're taking a look at Vespiquen, when you're taking a look at Sharpedo, you know, Manectric, when you're taking a look at things like even single prize Pokemon like Magnezone, but you know, all of those dark type decks that are super broken also, you know, from Mega Absol to Hoopa EX to Darkrai, they can all get KO'd by Lucario, and I think that's really the one main thing here is that, you know, at least this season, it seems like they added so many strong cards to the game, but they're all within KO range for Mega Lucario, which is a big reason why I think it's been so popular this season. And bench damage to me with Hitmontop does seem like a very valuable option, and Bonsly as well, which just in general is in fact a really good Pokemon, not only for the Hoopa matchup, which some people agree with, some people don't, but clearly it is nice into Hoopa. It's just nice into so many different leadoff options. It takes minus 30 damage from attacks, and a lot of these leadoff Pokemon like do kind of hit for 30 or 40 or 50, right? So it allows you to kind of get in there, get some early chip damage, maybe tag a Pokemon before they retreat it out if they do lead with a Pokemon that they don't want in the active, and then, you know, you can kind of stick around for a turn or two, and it also doesn't require an energy attachment, which in general makes Mega Lucario a little bit faster of an archetype, right? You can commit those energies to Mega Lucario, and then Hitmontop, right, to spread the damage, you know, target something on the bench and then bring it up later in the game and KO it with Mega Lucario. But everything else about this deck list, pretty standard. We do got the Protective Poncho in here, which I do like. I think Poncho is a very important card currently in the season. Lots of Hoopas running around, but bench damage really is kind of everywhere. And Xianpao as well, one of the more significant, you know, bench damaging Pokemon. Greninja floating around as well. I just like Poncho. I think Poncho is a good card. Still a lot of field blower, so it's not like the number one, like it doesn't always work, but it is a good card to play. But again, Mega Lucario, 140 damage, but with Fighting Coach Lucario, with Arena of Antiquity, with Korrina, lots of additional damage potential out here, and it allows these fighting type decks, namely Mega Lucario, to one-hit KO a lot of Pokemon that are at the top of the metagame. Here's the deck list, guys, and also there's the code, an 11-1-1 record. So one of the better runs we've had in quite some time at PMPT. Mega Lucario, the most popular deck this weekend, and the most popular deck this season, getting a win at PMPT number 42. It shouldn't really surprise anybody, but you know, the number one deck doesn't always have to be surprising, right? It can be sort of a further validation of what's going on in the metagame. There is your code. I moved the cursor, so it should work for you guys. You guys can put this right into your decks, into your game, and maybe just update your Lucario, because I guarantee you everybody has Mega Lucario built in the game already. But anyway, let's get into Fittipaldis' deck, the second highest placing deck this weekend. And like I said, guys, this is a different version of Magnezone, a purely single prize archetype. This is going to be Magnezone and Heliolisk. One Oricorio thrown in here because why not? This is a deck that's been floating around a bit this season. I really do like it because, again, one of the more pure single prize archetypes in the entire game. This plays one of both Helioisks, right? So we have Thunderbolt Heliolisk, which for 2 energy does 120 and discards the energy, but 120 is a pretty good number. It's, you know, it's a nice big amount of damage that you can use to take a KO, going to be valuable with a lot of those Mega Pokemon decks, right? But then we also have the new Heliolisk, right? Right, with Electra Spark, which does 40 and 20 to the bench, but, you know, all of this damage gets boosted by Clement's Backpack, right? And as we know, Clement is a card that works with, you know, the Magnezone package, right? Because it can grab Magneton. So it does make sense to play Heliolisk and Magnezone all together because Clement is just such an incredible support card, and so is Clement's Backpack, that you just kind of throw them all together in a deck list, and you have a lot of different options, tons of consistency. A lot of these are just a really strong Pokemon, and Magnezone continues to be just one of the better things in the entire game. It's an interesting build because you're playing a lot of one-ofs. Like, you would think it's difficult to kind of find the specific types of Pokemon that you're looking for, but to be honest, like, you just use what you kind of have available to you, and most of the time you're going to have multiple options because you're running double Clement and double, Research and a Copycat in the deck list and 2 Pokeballs. So in general, the deck is like kind of hyper consistent, and you just rely on your Pokemon. And having to go through like a Magnezone and an Oricorio or maybe a couple of Helioisks, like, it isn't that easy to do. The deck's got pacing, it's got the single prize advantage, you have Mirror Shot Magnezone, which is broken still, and you have Oricorio, which is always going to help you win games. So I really do like this deck. Didn't get the win over the Mega Lucario in first place, but did go 10-3, made it to Grand Final. So definitely a very impressive run. A deck that I really like. And Lightning has changed around a lot this season, more than really anything else, I would say, right? It was Manectric and Heliolisk to start the season, then Lucario came in hot, and then it was sort of Magnezone, Miraidon, sometimes Magnezone without Miraidon, just Oricorio. And now, of course, we're seeing it here with Heliolisk. Still an Oricorio, but, you know, a different archetype. No Miraidon in here. So it's just an interesting thing to note. Definitely been an interesting season for the Lightning archetype. Shout out to Fittipaldis. Really, really cool deck list there. But in third place is going to be my personal favorite this weekend, which is Great Tusk. This is going to be Nako. So I did cover Great Tusk from Portugal. Shout out to him. Third place, the third place deck of the tournament. And I did cover Great Tusk a bit this season. I have talked about it because it did kind of rise back up as like a somewhat relevant deck list. It takes advantage of a couple of things that I find to be really, really interesting. This is more of a balanced version of Great Tusk, playing a lot of different options in here. But Great Tusk is a strong Pokemon. I've been saying this since day one. It's a basic Pokemon, 120 HP, and of course, for only 2 energies, it does 80 damage. But we have Ancient Booster Capsule, which brings this thing up to 160 HP, I think, which is kind of crazy. You have Lucky Ice Pop, but we have access to a lot of different support. We have, of course, the new Rainbow Cave, which is going to pair extremely well with Sada to allow us to maybe, kind of get back on the correct energy curve if we end up going first, which Great Tusk never liked to go first. And now, Sada in the past was used to kind of set up a Pokemon later in the game after something got KO'd, because those energies were in your discard pile. However, Rainbow Cave can just put those fighting energies directly into your discard pile, and then you can just use Professor Sada to go +1 for that turn and get that 2 energy attachment in a single turn setup, which does allow you to kind of attack much more aggressively with Great Tusk, which is, I think, a really big upside is when you can kind of get that turn 2 attack off with Great Tusk. Still playing one Furfrou in the deck. Furfrou is just another good leadoff. The thing about Great Tusk Koraidon is that you don't want Koraidon as your leadoff Pokemon. In fact, you might as well just concede if you do lead with Koraidon. And I think that's why a lot of people thought this deck was silly. But, realistically, you're playing 4 basics and only one of them is the card you don't want to lead off with. So it's a really slim chance. I believe when you're playing 2 Great Tusk, 1 Furfrou, 1 Koraidon, it's like a 12, not even, I think it's like a 7% chance maybe, that you're forced to lead with Koraidon. Which, is fine, but in all other scenarios, the deck is in fact very, very strong. And if you lead Furfrou, that's fine. Even if you want to just bench Furfrou, its Fur Coat ability means that Great Tusk will not actually damage Furfrou while it's sitting on the bench. And then, later in the game, you just bring in Koraidon, which you can also use Sada to get it set up, and then you just hit. And Koraidon, a lot of people think isn't that strong of a card, but the fact that you can bring it in, get it set up in a single turn, you don't have to bench it, which is really nice, so it's not susceptible to bench damage and Cyrus combos. That's another big aspect of this deck list. You're not susceptible to Cyrus or Repel, which is a really big deal. But also, again, you can just sort of, attach an Ancient Booster Capsule to Koraidon when you bring it in, and it's got 190 HP. It might as well be like a Mega Pokemon. And again, it sets itself up with all of the energies. And this deck list actually is playing 1 Arena of Antiquity and 1 Korrina. So you actually have additional reach here with this deck list as well, at least into EX Pokemon, which is really cool. So the buffs this season to Great Tusk Koraidon have been one of my favorite things. This is the deck that I'm actually playing on ranked. Maybe not this exact list, but maybe it's time for me to change my list around a little bit. But yeah, a deck that, again, is really strong. Fighting in general is strong, but Great Tusk has been buffed pretty tremendously with, I think, Rainbow Cave. Really, really fun. I love that deck list. 3rd place finish for Nako. Really, really cool. 4th place, Froggy X Leo. Leo from Belgium, and this is Vespiquen. Again, a list that, wait, did I forget to bring up the code? I need the code. Here's the Great Tusk code, okay? I know if I forget a code, people are going to comment about it. So here's the Great Tusk code. There you go. Somebody did comment that, like, I should, when I pull up the code, have some type of way to distinguish, like, what code we're looking at. And I think that probably does make sense for people that aren't actually watching the video and they're just kind of skipping ahead. And I do apologize for those people, but just watch the video. That way you can know. Anyway, there's the Great Tusk code. Anyway, here is going to be Leo's deck. This is 4th place, and this is Vespiquen. And you know what? I don't really think much is changing with Vespiquen. This is actually just double Shuckle. So we've completely gotten away from any single prize Pokemon. And we're just entirely reliant on like EX cards, which is probably fine considering these Pokemon have more HP. They're all 2 prize Pokemon, so it's sort of fine. We're playing 1 Sabrina in the deck, 1 Field Blower, 1 Cyrus, double X Speed. Speed. And the double X Speed is interesting, mostly just because you probably do want the ability to like be with the correct Pokemon in the active, right? That's a big thing about this deck list, and just consistency in general. That's why we're playing double Copycat, double Research, and double Fragrant Forest. Extremely consistent. You know, we don't really want Ogerpon in the active, and Combee's not a terrible Pokemon in the active. It can KO baby Pokemon, but the main Pokemon you want is Shuckle EX, right? So double XP to consistently get into Shuckle, and then you just attack until you're ready to start attacking with Vespiquen. And, you know, since you can discard your damaged Pokemon on the bench with Chase Order and hit for 140 HP, 140 damage, it's just a good deck. It's quite good, and this is a deck that does extremely well into basically every Dark-type deck that you could possibly imagine, and it can hold its own into most other archetypes as well. This, to me, has been a very interesting example of power creep this season. Something like a Vespiquen, again, with all of the Grass-type support around it, being able to just hit for 140 and remove losing conditions by discarding those basic Pokemon on your bench. It's a big deal. Like, this is a really strong deck, and I think it's actually kind of been one of the more significant things to remove a lot of other things from the metagame. Just sort of gatekeeping in a sense. The power creep here is pretty phenomenal, and this definitely has had a pretty profound impact on the metagame. 9-3 record, 4th place. Here you go. Here's Vespiquen if you guys wanted to play it. Interesting. I mean, comment down below what you think. Should you be playing, you know, Pheromosa or other, you know, Grass-type Pokemon in this deck list? Maybe some single prizers. I don't know. We've seen that in the past. Vespiquen, I think it's either the second or third most played deck this season. Definitely very successful. Continues to be a strong deck. And again, multiple of these actually, I think, in top 16. So there you go. There is Vespiquen. And then next up, let's take a look at Hosey's Mega Lucario deck just to see if it's any different. I am curious. Yeah, okay. So it's slightly different just immediately. We're not playing two different Riolu. We're just playing the two Punch Riolu, which is strange to me. Like, I don't know why we would play this one other than, of course, having 70 HP, which maybe it is relevant. I don't know. We're playing one X Speed, one Bonsly, and then one Hitmonlee instead of Hitmontop, right? So Hitmontop, 20 and 20. Hitmonlee is just 30 to the active. So, you know, it depends. Or if they're not 30 to the active, 30 to the bench. Now, again, I don't know if the math really matters that much. I'm sure it probably does. Like, I do like Hitmontop. However, like 20 is not going to KO anything in the active or on the bench ever, right? So if you're going up against like Magikarps or other baby Pokemon that might be on the bench, like Hitmonlee can KO, and it's a bit more effective. It can 2-hit KO certain basic Pokemon that might have, of course, you know, 50 or 60 HP. So that's a somewhat big deal as well. Double Karina, one Arena of Antiquity. So two Karina in this deck list, one Lucky Ice Pop, one Sabrina, one Cyrus, one X Speed, still one Fighting Coach, Lucario. Again, Lucario doesn't need to be that fancy. It doesn't have to be that crazy. It just kind of does what it's supposed to do. And again, just the numbers. The thing about Lucario is, you know, the damage thresholds, the breakpoints, like just being able to hit harder than really any other deck can in the game, without as much setup as something like a Mega Charizard, right? Which is kind of the sweet spot. And I think a big reason why Mega Lucario has really become kind of the default, not only the default deck this season, but really the default Mega Pokemon. You know, like it's just better. It's just something that, you know, people are gravitating towards. And I think when you take a look at all Mega Pokemon in Pokemon Pocket right now, like Mega Lucario is that guy, you know, and again, it's probably because of all of the support it's got around it, but also just, you know, how other strong meta decks are built. Anyway, Mega Lucario, shout out to Hosey. 6th place is going to be Kylord. Kylord here from Mexico, and it's Zoroark, right? Which I think we haven't really talked much about Zoroark this season. We are playing one Hoopa in here, and one Darkrai, and one Mega Absol. One Bombardier for the free retreat, or I guess lesser retreat cost, and then a Roaring Moon as well. So, you know, it's interesting. You know, one Roaring Moon on top of Sabrina and Cyrus is pretty cool. Now, I do think Roaring Moon makes sense when you're playing Zoroark because you want more dark Pokemon. That way, of course, you can always hit hard with Zoroark, which is a very good Pokemon. I don't want to like sit here and discredit it. You do have to evolve this Pokemon to have the same amount of HP as Hoopa EX. But again, it's 90 damage potentially for only 1 energy, which is a really big deal. Like, you're going to 2-hit KO a lot of things, and now we have Deceptive Needle. So it's the pacing with Zoroark that I think gives it that you know, kind of potential. You know, before it used to be like this sort of middle ground, you know, between Hydreigon, where Hydreigon was just in general maybe a bit stronger potentially on turn 2, but Zoroark was a lot more consistent and aggressive on turn 2, and I think that's why a lot of people started to favor it. Also, like, the higher HP amount was definitely nice, and because it's a single energy attacker, it just leads really well into like attaching those extra energies to your Mega Absol, or in this case, your Darkrai, and Hoopa's just another option, right, which is a really big deal. 30 and 20, Hoopa's broken, so just why not throw it in the deck list? It'll make your deck better. still double Deceptive Needle, 1 Copycat, 1 PCL, so still playing some Sleep Protection in here, 1 Field Blower as like the consummate 20th card in people's decks these days, and Professor's Research. And I think Field Blower is a really great card. It'll continue to be just super impactful. Tons of tool cards, tons of supporter cards. I mean, every deck is playing those cards. They are very, very important, and Field Blowers are kind of your best protection against those certain things. So I really do like it. You know, Dark is great. Dark is really good. You know, luckily Vespiquen isn't as popular now as it was, but something like this really should be able to hold its own into Lucario. I know all of these Pokemon do get KO'd, but we have extra pacing, right? We've got some bench damage. You know, Zoroark can like kind of come in and like one hit KO, like a Hitmonlee or, you know, whatever's in the active, and then maybe kind of outpace a little bit. Like, I'm not saying it always works, but, you know, realistically speaking, we are playing Roaring Moon and a Sabrina, so maybe we can kind of get some target, you know, early game gusting options to kind of target those Railus. I don't know. You know, there's definitely some opportunity here for Zoroark to be able to compete against the top tier decks. Very consistent, very aggressive, very strong. Dark is one of the better types, I would say, in Pokemon Pocket. And I need to pull up the code. Did I forget the code for the last deck? I might have, actually. I apologize. If I did, I'm so sorry. I need to get better at remembering the codes. It's still new to me. It's been new as a new thing this season. But here's the code for Zoroark. One that actually, you know, I do probably kind of want to test Zoroark a little bit. I wonder how many people are playing it in ranked. It'd be an interesting thing to check. Comment down below. Have you been playing Zoroark in ranked or a deck similar to this in ranked, and how's that going for you? I would love to know. Comment down below. I love when you guys comment. I read all of the comments, of course. Next up, what do we got? We're going to go down to 7th place, which is Kindoran, and this is going to be Sharpedo. Let's take a look. I love Sharpedo, man. I really do. I think that this is a broken deck. Oh, look. Oh, we got a Cramorant in here. Okay, so double Sharpedo Carvanha lineup, right? So the 2/2, 1 Qianpao, but then 1 Cramorant. This is going to be Spit Out Shot Cramorant, rather, which does, for 1 energy, does 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So it's Hitmonlee, which is pretty cool. This is a card that probably should be seeing more play. This is it's a water type Hitmonlee, and as we know, Hitmonlee is quite good. So, you know, an aggressive deck, a deck more focused around bench damage, one that I think is quite interesting. Now, again, you don't really want to lead. Hold on, I got to go back here. Where did I go? Right here. So you know, you don't want to lead Qianpao, right? But we are playing only one copy of Wallace is interesting. So we're not reliant on that kind of turn 1 Wallace come up, but we are playing Soothing Shore and double Irida and double Elegant Cape. So this is also very, very interesting to me, because what this is going to do is bring Sharpedo up to 220 HP, which is a lot. Coincidentally, it's a ton. And then Irida and Soothing Shore is going to be a ton of healing. So we're kind of playing Sharpedo more as like a, you know, kind of a tanky option. Keep in mind though, you know, this is something that you probably don't want to have in the active like that often, just because, you know, if it does take damage, it could pretty easily get brought back up into the active spot. So, you know, Irida and Soothing Shore, this is cool. This is something that I really theorized with Sharpedo, because technically speaking, you know, it is pretty tanky and we have a lot of healing options, right? So if you do get double Sharpedo, you can kind of just bounce between the two of them, and then Irida can heal them both, Soothing Shore can heal them both. It's a really, really cool strategy, one that I really do need to test more of. You know, again, a top 8 finish for Mega Sharpedo. Lots of potential here. It is still a little bit scary because things like Mega Lucario do hit really hard, and they also play Field Blower. But yeah, Elegant Cape, Mega Sharpedo, that's going to be 220 HP into a lot of other decks. Like, it's going to be able to kind of hold its own, and I really do like the Cramorant thrown in here. Qianpao is a pretty prominent win condition. No Field Blower or anything in terms of tool removal, so we're not going to be able to get rid of protected ponchos, which is kind of scary for a deck like this. Might have been a downside here. Whoever, you know, if anyone's watching this, if Kindoran's watching this, comment down below, let me know. But I really do like this. Water definitely intrigues me this season, mostly because it's not that popular, but we did get some really interesting new cards for the water type, right? With Sharpedo, with Soothing Shore, and there's just a lot of potential there. Maybe we need just the meta to change a little bit. I don't know. But water is definitely something that we could be looking at in the near future as something really, really strong and just really broken. And I think we look at it like that now. It's just not something that's, you know, necessarily that popular, which is interesting. But anyway, okay, lastly here, before we get into the metagame data, is going to be our 8th place finish here, which is Nobody, and Nobody was playing Dark Hoopa. So Dark Hoopa does find its way into top 8. This is, to me, a deck list that I think has really significantly changed around the metagame in terms of like what decks people are playing, right? You know, I think we saw like Mega Lucario with Field Blower, with you know, Protective Poncho. Like, that's the type of stuff you're seeing right now, because Dark Hoopa and really all Hoopa decks are phenomenally strong. Tons of ping damage, very hyper aggressive. Just really interesting right now. You know, this is a deck that's playing Repel and Mars, which to me immediately makes it one of my favorite decks that, you know, is in the game right now, because those are two really fun cards that you don't really see that often. Still playing a Field Blower. We have X-Speed, PCL in the deck, 2 Lucky Ice Pops, and that's the thing that does kind of weigh me down a little bit, like especially when I'm playing on the ranked ladder and I'm playing like Hoopa, is like, do I want to play a double Lucky Ice Pop deck? Because in a lot of games it does kind of come down to whether or not you can get those Ice Pops. But to be honest, like, this is also just an incredible deck list. Does reward kind of high skill play, making high decisions, you know, kind of choosing which Pokemon you want to target. There's a lot going on with this deck, incredibly strong. If it wasn't for Mega Lucario being able to come in and 1-hit KO your whole deck, this is something that would be absolutely terrifying, I'm not gonna lie. But they've balanced the dark type stuff pretty well. None of these dark type Pokemon hit for a tremendous amount of damage, and I think that's kind of a good thing. It's more death by 1,000 cuts, or needles, I guess. You know, between Hoopa, between Nightmare Aura, Darkrai Pings, and Deceptive Needles, like, the damage really does kind of rack up pretty quickly. So it's a really, really strong deck. We've been talking about it all season. No surprise that it got top 8 here. In fact, I'm surprised it didn't make top 4. But, you know, it's just one of those weeks, I guess. Here is Nobody's code here if you guys want to bring this Hoopa deck into your game. Keep in mind, though, you will feel bad playing this on the ranked ladder. You're going to be like, man, I probably should be playing something a bit more, you know, fair. That's how it feels to me. Again, I haven't played a ton of Hoopa because early on the season I was playing it, and I just couldn't. I feel like I couldn't lose with it. But, you know, again, there are things that beat this, right? So if you hit grass, you know, it's going to also feel that way, where everything just sort of gets 1-hit KO'd. Really, really good. Really strong deck list. There you go, guys. Again, I really love Mars and Repel in the deck list. But let's wrap up this video. Let's wrap this up here, guys. I know not everybody sticks around for the metagame data, but the cool thing about PocketMads.com is that we have such great access to really valuable data. So I'm just going to go down through all of the metagame stuff really quickly for those of you that are interested. And I do think it's valuable info if you're really kind of looking to understand what's going on in the metagame. And again, that's why I do it. I find this interesting. Let's get right into it, guys. So, the meta shares. This is the deck representation for the tournament. Now, Mega Lucario was the most popular deck. As you see, 13.2% of the meta, a lot more really than any other deck list. In fact, it was about double the next most played deck this weekend, which was Dark Koopa. So, you know, is that a good thing? I don't think we're approaching like tier 0, you know, potentials, but, you know, 13% is pretty significant. There's, you know, a much higher chance to win, you know, a tournament if 13% of the deck or of the tournament is playing that deck list, right? I mean, Mega Lucario did win this weekend, right? So it makes sense that 13% of the tournament was playing it. Dark Koopa at 6.8%, and it was Suicune Excalibur, in fact, rising back up to 5% of the meta share, although no, I believe, top 8 finishes. Were there even any top 16 finishes for Suicune? I don't think there was, yeah. So Suicune kind of rising back up as a top 3 most played deck, but nowhere in top 16 to be found. So could this be the definitive sort of end of the Suicune era? Mega Sharpedo did do somewhat well, interestingly enough. So I find that interesting, and it actually overtook Vespiquen with 4.6% of the meta share, and in fact, Sceptile almost had the same amount of play rate as Vespiquen. So both of these decks really kind of, you know, having the same amount of play. But if you do add up these two grass type archetypes, it does come up to be, you know, over 8%. And in fact, it was Venusaur, which squeezed into the top 8 most played decks just behind Charizard at 2.5%. So grass still seeing a ton of play, but, you know, these aren't necessarily counter meta decks to Lucario, right? They counter dark type decks. However, the 6th most played deck was Gouging Fire Rayquaza at 4% of the meta share, but none of them in top 8 or in top 16, I don't believe. And then Mega Charizard, also 4%. Now, I think Mega Charizard makes sense to me. Also Sceptile, because these are decks that can hold their own into Mega Lucario, traditionally speaking. But let's see how these decks did in terms of win rates and performances. So, Dark Hoopa, in fact, did have a great win rate. So it had a 53.7% win rate this weekend. That was the highest out of any of the most played decks. But Lucario's still high up there, almost 52%, 51.5%. So even though it was the most played deck by a pretty wide margin, still a very respectable deck in terms of its win rate. Vespiquen was 50%, but everything else that was popular, at least, didn't do extremely well. Charizard floating just below 50%, as I always tell you that it does, okay? That's almost like a meme at this point. If anyone's been watching my channel, Charizard will always be just below a 50% win rate. I don't know why. I don't know how. It's just always the case. I always joke about it. And then Mega Rayquaza also with Gouging Fire at least just below 50%. You know, maybe just not the strongest deck given the landscape of the metagame. But certainly not a terrible deck either. So, you know, if a deck has a 49% win rate, it's fine. Like, we don't think about it too much. Suicune 44%, and then Venusaur 43, and Sceptile 42. So these are decks that really saw a decent amount of play, but just didn't end up being great options, given kind of the the results that we're seeing here, quite frankly. Venusaur did make it right into top 16, but Sceptile did not, and neither did Suicune, neither did Gouging Fire for that matter, or Charizard, which is kind of crazy. And let's take a look here at top cut conversion, right? So day 2 conversion rate, and effectively what this means is how well positioned these decks were into what we consider to be, the actual kind of distribution of the meta, right? In day 1 of Swiss rounds. And basically, what this is telling me, and again, you want to compare this to what decks were the most played, effectively. So compare deck representation amongst the top 8 to top cut conversion rate. So Dark Koopa into the greater field was a phenomenal choice. It had the highest day 2 conversion rate, even though it wasn't the most played deck list. And Vespiquen as well was actually still higher than Lucario. So given the scope of the entire metagame and what decks people were playing in day 1, Dark Koopa and Vespiquen were still phenomenal options, which means that they're still worth playing, even kind of aside from maybe what the final results of the tournament and the final standings do say. That's just, again, how I interpret this data. Mega Lucario, in fact, was a very decent choice. It's still a dominant deck, 25% conversion rate, which is still very good. And then Mega Venusaur at a 25. So in day 1, Mega Venusaur, in fact, did do quite well. Gouging Fire did somewhat fine at a 15% conversion rate. Charizard 15%, but yeah, Suicune and Sceptile were quite low in terms of how popular they were. So again, even though these were the most played decks and how they rank up in terms of popularity, things like Suicune, things like Sceptile, definitely not actual great choices this weekend, whereas things like Dark Koopa really were, and things like Venusaur actually was better, more so, which is just interesting to me. Definitely 25% for Mega Venusaur is kind of crazy. Anyway, these are going to be our top 8 tech card inclusions, meaning, the popularity of certain cards as they were appearing in top 8 basically kind of just tells you, like the trends in terms of if you're looking to top a tournament, these are the cards that you're probably going to be finding in those deck lists. Things like X-Speed, right? So X-Speed's a really big deal. What this tells me that X-Speed is the number 1 on this list is that so many of the top decks right now are in fact playing tool cards that they find very important, that are not basically retreating tool cards, right? So like you have Small Balloon in the game. However, like people aren't playing Small Balloon as much, they're playing X-Speed, which means that you're going to be seeing things like, Deceptive Needle or Protective Poncho or Elegant Capes or Giant Capes, right? So people are choosing to play tool cards and they still want to retreat, but they're not playing Small Balloon. They're in fact just playing X-Speed, which is interesting. And then Karina and Arena of Antiquity, these are here because fighting in general is broken, right? This is what that's telling us, that the fighting type cards are really good. In top 8, we had, I think, 2 Lucario, and we also had a Great Tusk Koraidon, right? So fighting is strong. Fighting is really, really good. Damage is good. Dealing damage is really good, so that's why fighting is good, and I think people need to realize that. Cyrus is, well, still an important card, and Lucky Ice Pop still very prominent. Deceptive Needle as well, finding its way into really all dark type decks. So there you go. And then here are the matchup spreads just for this tournament. So this data is definitely kind of limited in terms of what we're seeing. But this weekend, Lucario did extremely well into Vespiquen, into Suicune. I did a little bit well actually into Sceptile and Venusaur, but lost to Gouging Fire. So Gouging Fire really is kind of the true Lucario counter. However, Gouging Fire, if we go down here, really not beating at all Dark Koopa or Suicune Excalibur. So it just lose to those bench damaging decks. However, Gouging Fire Rayquaza doing really good into Charizard, into Lucario, into Sceptile, more of these kind of back-end kind of setup decks, right? Because, Rayquaza can just KO you. It could just sort of pile on the energies and KO. Gouging Fire as well is a good card. Anyway, Dark Koopa doing quite well into a lot of the top tier meta decks as we see, but really just loses to grass. This is what this tells us, right? So the only way to really beat Dark Koopa consistently, at least currently in the metagame, is to play a grass type deck. But, as we know, grass did win this weekend. It was Lucario that ended up winning. So, maybe Hoopa deserves to see more play. Maybe we stop playing grass. Why are we countering Dark Koopa when we should be countering Lucario, right? It is the most played deck. 11% into Vespiquen, 33% into Sceptile, 0% into in a Venusaur. So, people definitely have found the counterplay to Dark Hoopa, unfortunately. It didn't win. Lucario was what won. Suicune, doesn't beat Lucario, doesn't beat Dark Hoopa, doesn't beat Vespiquen, but Suicune is doing really well into Rayquaza. It's doing really well into Charizard and I guess Sceptile, at least this weekend. Vespiquen, bad into Lucario, bad into Sceptile, but again, good into basically everything else. So, it's a very volatile matchup spread there. Sceptile kind of struggling into most things other than Dark Hoopa and Vespiquen. But I guess if you wanted to beat those two decks, there you go. And then Gouging Fire, again, really good into Lucario this weekend, good into Sceptile and Charizard, but literally didn't beat a single time Dark Hoopa in Suicune, which is crazy to say. And then Charizard. So Charizard's beating Lucario, which is interesting, and Sceptile, but other than that, it doesn't really do anything else. And then Venusaur, again, hard counters into Suicune as it's always been, but 100% into Hoopa this weekend is definitely interesting, but really bad into everything else. So very volatile matchup spread. Some specific counters kind of coming into the metagame right now, kind of trying to find their place. Some doing pretty well, but again, when we take a look at the top of those standings there, what do we see, right? We see Magnezone in Heliolisk, we see Great Tusk, Koraidon, and then some, typical faces in Lucario and Vespiquen. Sharpedo is really interesting to me. I think it's something that does deserve to see a bit more play, but maybe people kind of go the Magnezone route as well. It's interesting. It's a very strange meta. Unfortunately for you guys, and for me, I suppose, we only have about a week left until the meta changes forever. So, so it doesn't really matter that much. I guess it does, because there's another PMPT. There's the last PMPT of the season, PMPT number 43, which you guys should definitely go and register for. Stay tuned for all of the news regarding, everything coming to Pokemon Pocket. Again, new set announcement this week, but then next week we go right into the World Championships. We have the Pokemon Pocket panel. They have confirmed new content will be announced. So it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be a very exciting time to wrap up the next couple of weeks for Pokemon Pocket. So stay tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Go check out PocketMads.com. Go register for PMPT number 43. And I'm going to get out of here. Peace out, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you guys next time. And yeah. Bye.